So, welcome to Wisdom. I am so excited for today's show. We have a very, very special guest speaker here with me today. So, as you know, this is the place where we're going to find tools to help us transform our business from meh to magnificent authors, speakers, entrepreneurs, remarkable people, and artists who are going to share their wisdom with you. My special guest today is Mr. John David Mann. John, welcome to our show, and thank you so much for taking your time to share your wisdom with us.
It is my pleasure. It's great to be here. Thank you, Serena.
Thank you. And just a little bit of background, if I may. So, John, you are a multi-best-selling author who has sold more than 2 million copies of your book. One of them, of course, that we know for sure is because you were a co-writer of The Go-Giver, which was a bestseller with Mr. Bob Burg, who we had the pleasure of interviewing a little while back. So we are familiar with your writing, and we love your writing. We love your writing style. And on top of that, you also started a high school when you were in high school. You were a founder of a high school. You are a cellist, an award-winning composer. And you also wrote what Washington Post and it is Tom Peters called the best leadership book of 2011. And that was called Take the Lead. And your newest book, of course, is called The Recipe, which that's what we want to talk about today. The Recipe, your newest book that you co-authored with chef Charles Carroll. And Charles is a culinary Olympic gold medalist. So that one's always a mouthful for me to say, but so exciting. It's a beautiful book. Can you tell us a little bit about that book? There's actually two things we want to talk about with you today, please. The first one is about the journey of you writing the book as an entrepreneur and as an author, and some of the wisdom that you can share from that side. And of course, what's in this beautiful book, The Recipe, that I so enjoyed.
Well, yeah, that's a lot. And you said that mouthful perfectly. And I'll tell you, before writing this book, I didn't know that there was such a thing as a culinary Olympian gold medalist. But there is. There is this Culinary Olympics. It happens every 4 years, just like the regular Olympics. You train for it like crazy, for hundreds of hours, for years, just like for the regular Olympics. We've all seen videos of kids, their moms bringing them to skating lessons at 4 a.m, and they do this since the age they're 6 years old, and then they grow. Well, it's just like that in the Culinary Olympics. These guys train for hours and hours and hours. They're not paid to do it. They just do it in their spare time. And these are all people who have full-time jobs in the culinary world. So it's more than a contest. It's more than a competition. It's a calling. It's a devotion. It's a life calling. It's amazing. I've gotten to know this whole culinary world, and I've always loved food. I don't know if there's anybody watching this who loves food. Probably one or two people.
Just a few,
Just a few. But I've always loved food. And when Charles contacted me, Chef Carroll contacted me, he was reading The Go-Giver. About a year after The Go-Giver came out, he was a huge fan of The Go-Giver. And he contacted me out of the blue.
Wow.
This executive chef from Texas contacted me and said, I love The Go-Giver. I'm using it with my staff. And he has a staff of like 75 at this. He has one of the busiest country clubs in the nation. And he says, I use it as a management tool.
Wow.
We'd like you to come out and speak to my staff about The Go-Giver. So I said, of course. So I did. You're going to turn something like that down?
No, definitely not. Yeah.
So I went out to Texas and went to his club and spoke about The Go-Giver. And while I was there, he said, look, I have this idea for a story about this young boy, this 14-year-old boy who's lost his dad, and his life is in trouble, and he's kind of spiraling the drain. Yeah. And he crosses paths with this crusty old retired chef who started teaching him lessons in the kitchen that proved to be life lessons. And I was hooked. Man, I thought, wow. So we're talking about personal growth and leadership and great food and great cooking. And I'm in. So it took us years to clear our schedules and find time to write the book. We wrote the book.
Yeah.
And so I know we have 2 tracks today. Talk about the actual, what's in the book and the story, but also about the journey of the book itself, which has been kind of wild and unique for me.
Okay.
So let's go with the journey of it first.
Great.
So we wrote this book. Now, Charles had already drafted. He had worked on this idea for years. Charles is a really creative guy. He's not a writer, but he'd written 2 books anyway. He'd written 2 books for culinary students, Leadership Lessons of the Chef, and I'm getting the name of his other book, but they're both books that are used in culinary schools. And they're about, finding greatness in the culinary path. That's really cool. But they're for culinary students. Yeah. It's a specialty. It's a niche. So he had drafted some ideas for this book, and he showed them to me, and I took those as a basis. Okay. Bob Burg had done the same thing with The Go-Giver. Before Bob and I got together, Bob had drafted some early chapters of a sort of a prototype Go-Giver, which he gave to me, and that was where I started. Anyway, so wrote the book, gave it to my agent. My agent called me back, screaming on the phone, and said, "Oh my God, this is the best writing you've ever done. This is incredible. We're going to take it to New York. It's going to go to auction," which means all the different publishers all, bid out, each other. And then she said it's going to be a maelstrom. It's going to be a bloodbath, and it's going to command a 7-figure advance. This is going to be your most successful book ever. None of those things happened. She took it to New York. That happened, but the auction didn't happen. And so here's what happened. We brought it to a bunch of editors, and they read the book, and they said, "Oh my God, I love this. I love the characters, the boy. He's so real. I feel so empathetic for him. The story is very moving. The life lessons are very profound. The cooking is so vivid. It makes me I'm drooling as I read it, and I want to go to my kitchen. Book is phenomenal, and we're going to pass." And then the next editor said the same thing, and then the next editor said the same thing. And we got over 40 editors, read the book, and loved it. I tell you, Serena, some of the things they sent to us in email, I would be honored to put on the back of the book as quotes, as endorsements. They were that effusive in their praise, but they all passed. Mm-hmm. And the deal was, it's like we took it to Portfolio, who is our Go-Giver publisher. And these guys are wonderful. They're great partners, and we love them. We still work with them. We got a new Go-Giver book coming out next year.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, amazing. Yeah.
There was a dog in it, and there was a cat in it.
Sweet.
As well as,
okay, of course. Because also Bob Burg is an animal lover, much like ourselves, right?
Much like ourselves, exactly. So, it's either food or animals. So we'll talk about that another time. But
sounds good.
So Portfolio is amazing. But they said, we love this book, but we're a business publisher. And this isn't presented as a business book. Mm-hmm. The Go-Giver, as you know, it's not just a business book. It's really a book about life.
100%.
But we presented it as a business book.
Got it.
And it's very clear what the lessons for business are. Right. With the recipe, I just did a podcast the other day with a guy in Alaska who has a whole real estate business. He said, I took the 7 rules from the recipe. There's 7 rules in the recipe. I took the 7 rules, I printed them out, and I gave them to all my realtors and said, guys, this is the distillation of what you need to know to run a great business. 100%. So you could use it as a business book, but we didn't present it that way. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So this publisher said, it's like we can't really publish this. It doesn't fit our category. In fact, we're not sure what category it fits. We don't know which shelf in Barnes & Noble it would sit on. We don't know quite where to categorize it on Amazon. It doesn't fit the pattern. And, it's just like Hollywood. Hollywood producers don't want to make a movie unless it's original, but at the same time that it's not too original, right? Like it follows a pattern that other successful movies have followed before.
Right.
And that's how publishing is.
Right.
And, when you publish a book, you're supposed to figure out what are comparable titles in your efforts to market it. Okay. I can't figure out what a comparable title is to the recipe. I don't know another book that's in personal growth. Yeah. So the publishers passed, and that meant Charles and I were faced with a decision. We shelve it and say, oh, well, or take it on ourselves. And you've got to understand, I'm not a publisher. I'm a writer. Mm-hmm. And Charles is by no stretch a publisher. He's an executive chef. Right. He's an administrator, a manager of a busy food program, but he's not. So we decided to take it on, and so that's what we're doing. We created our own publishing company, Austin David Books, and this is our first book. We're publishing it ourselves, promoting it, marketing it, distributing it ourselves, and it's terrifying.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you. And because I think that's an important part of all of our journeys, right? Is feeling the fear and being called to do something anyways, and seeing the vision of that. And we are so glad you did. And if we can talk a moment about accolades and praise, you've had some, and I'm not surprised. You've had some great praise for the book. As I noted in the front, people like Daniel Pink, people like Michael Port, people like George Forman, heavyweight champion boxer, who has called it an instant classic. And I'm not surprised. It is an extremely memorable book. And if I may say so, reading it, I completely could see how these are all business lessons. For the kitchen, for life, and for business, 100%. And I'd love to talk more about those lessons. But you have had some praise from, let's say, the business community as well, from people who see this as that. And I agree, it's a fabulous book. So can you tell us a little bit about the marketing, the entrepreneurial aspect, how you're going about that, and any lessons that you can take away, maybe something that was shortened, a lesson for you that, could help us on our journey, on our business journey, something that you've learned that you think would be important for us?
Sure. So I've been an entrepreneur before, and Charles has too. Charles has done all kinds of fascinating things in his life. I wish I had time to go into his journey, because it's wild, actually. He makes things happen. But that's the definition of an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is somebody who makes things happen. You don't rely on a track that somebody else has already beat. You don't rely on a path that someone else has cut. You cut it yourself. Yes. And the way I've done entrepreneurialism in the past is throw myself in it 24 hours a day. Just, hurl yourself at it. Right. Body, mind, and soul.
We can relate. Yeah.
All your money, all your time, all your everything. I can't do that. So I'm in this position where I have a very full, active calendar writing. I'm working on other books.
Right.
And I'm wall to wall writing. So I really couldn't afford to just take off 3, 4, 5, 6 months and just do this. And Charles certainly couldn't do that either. So we're both in the same boat. We want to do this thing. We want to launch this enterprise. We don't really know how it's done because we don't have the experience. We don't really have time. And we don't really have the resources. We can't just throw $80,000 at a marketing team and say, go make this happen. It's up to us. So one of the first things we had to do, and I think this may be a lesson that can apply anywhere, one of the first things we had to do is we had to figure out how we're going to use our time, what we were going to focus on and what we were going to not focus on.
Love it. Yeah.
We needed to figure out, this is maybe the biggest thing, we needed to figure out who we were going to listen to. Let's just take self-publishing. If you look at self-publishing right now, the self-publishing market has exploded in the last 10 years because of the internet, because anybody can self-publish now. The tools are there, right? So it's easy to put a book on Kindle or on CreateSpace on Amazon or whatever. You can even do it on hardcover now. But partly because of that, if you go online and look for a book on how to self-publish, there are 10,000 of them.
Right.
There are so many experts.
Yeah.
Between me, 99 out of 100 don't know what they're talking about. God bless them, they're trying, but there's so much advice out there that if you went out to listen to all of it, you would go crazy and you would also go bankrupt.
Okay.
So the question had to be, who are we going to listen to?
Okay.
And I spent a few weeks just kind of looking at what's out there, asking advice from some people that I know whose opinions I trust, people like Bob Burg and other co-writers I've worked with that I know and who I've known for years. And I kind of established my 3 or 4 expert voices. These are going to be who I listen to. And I've come across lots of other people that I've been told I should go listen. Not listening. Not listening.
Yeah. That's a really great point. Yeah.
I had to set limits.
Yeah.
I had to decide who I was going to listen to and then listen to them. And I don't mean listen to them without my own judgment, blindly. But basically, so I picked up a book that Bob Berg recommended, a book called Book Launch Blueprint by Tim Graw.
Okay.
And this is a guy who has done it. He launched one of Dan Pink's books.
Okay.
And many other very well-known best-selling authors. So he's a guy who has a track record. His book is beautiful. It's simple. It's one of those books that says, focus on these 3 things and forget everything else. Yeah. That's what I want.
Yeah.
So I made that my Bible. I spent $300 for a 1-hour consultation with a woman named Jane Friedman, who was one of the most respected consultants in publishing. Best $300 I ever spent.
Wow.
She was fantastic. She helped shorten my learning curve by months. And I just learned who these resources were through friends.
Yeah.
That was really, really critically important. I decided early on, one of the things I love most about a book coming out, when one of my books comes out, I go to Barnes & Noble and look at it. Serena, years before my first book was published, I lived in a little apartment not far from here, and it was just about 3 blocks from the Barnes & Noble. I used to go out every day, go to Barnes & Noble and get a coffee, and then I would sit and I would look at the shelves, and I would imagine my book being on those shelves. I mean, I literally did this. I would go around the shelves, I would find the business shelves, I would find the motivation, inspiration shelves, and find the marketing shelves, and I would look at those shelves, and there was Spencer Johnson's books, and there was David Bach's books, and there were all these. And I would look at them and I would imagine my book being there. I did that for years. And then a couple of years later, my books were on those shelves.
Fantastic.
It was just a thrilling experience. So still for me today, that is kind of validation. When a new book comes out, I go to Barnes & Noble and I look at it, and then it's real for me. With the recipe, one of the first things I realized was, it's not going to be on the shelf at Barnes & Noble.
Okay.
I had to give that up.
Mm-hmm.
I could spend money and time. There are experts that I could pay and consult with who would help me get it in certain stores, but it would be a lot of time and effort. I don't have the time. I don't have the focus. I can't afford it. Mm-hmm. I decided early on, forget bookstores, forget airports. I'm going to focus where I got to focus. So I think that was the first tough decision, is what are we going to, do and not.
And not do.
I think the next thing was, and this I got 2 more, should I keep going?
Absolutely. Oh, please.
Okay.
Yes.
I got 2 more points that I think are broadly applicable. The very next point was quality of product. Self-publishing is really a very different track than mainstream publishing. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways that it's different is that mostly they're people who are doing it themselves, right? Without professional consultation or professional help. Very sadly and unfortunately, the great thing is that anybody can do it. The unfortunate thing is anybody can do it. Yes. What that means is you've got the majority of self-published books, unfortunately, just looks terrible.
Okay.
I get these books all the time. I get books sent to me by people that I know or that I know a little bit, and my heart aches when I open the envelope, because these are often wonderful people with valuable ideas and real genuine value that they want to contribute, that the marketplace needs. Yeah. But the package is awful. It's not typeset well, the page isn't designed well, there are these awkward indents, there's spaces between paragraphs, the cover is not well designed, the thing is not proofread, there's spelling errors, the grammar is terrible, the punctuation's off. I mean, they go on and on. It's not professionally done. And I don't say this to sound snobbish. I say this just to, if you're going to run a restaurant, the decor has to be clean. The place has to be excellent. It has to be exquisite. It isn't just you have good food. It's got to be good presentation. Every chef knows that presentation is a big part of the eating experience.
Absolutely. It's a part of the brand. It's a part of perception. And you talk about this in the book, right?
Exactly. The first thing was that our first decision was the book's going to be self-published. It's not going to look self-published. We wanted this book to make sure this book was going to be, in every way possible, a professional presentation.
Nice.
If I needed to spend a lot of money doing that, I would have spent that money. I spent money. I paid an artist who's a friend of mine to do the watercolor that we use for the front cover illustration. Fortunately, I have the layout skills to design it myself, so that wasn't too hard to do. But that was critical. The quality of product. You can't skimp on quality of product. If you do, nothing else matters. Yeah. And the next thing we did was I got this idea from an author friend of mine to give the book away. To give the book away months ahead of time to a circle of readers. And I've always done that. Bob and I and my other co-authors and I, we've always given it to a handful of readers to say, what do you think? And get their input, get their critique. But that's usually like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people who do. And maybe a dozen, maybe 15. But I wanted it to go to a broader circle of readers. I ended up with 200 readers.
Wow. Wow.
Gave the book to all of them. And what I said was, and I got this idea from an author friend of mine, I said, listen, I'll give you the book to read on one condition. The only condition is, what I ask is you, two things. Tell me your favorite quotes from the book. And that's going to give me customer feedback. It's going to give me the customer's perspective on the experience of the product. This could apply to anything.
Absolutely.
And number 2, leave a customer comment on Amazon the day it launches, the week it launches. And if I were a restaurant, I would say, I'm going to give you a month's worth of food for free, or a week's worth of food for free, or whatever, 10 minutes for free. My only request is, the first week we're open, I want you to come in for dinner at least twice that week. Why? Because what makes a restaurant look successful? If there are people inside.
Absolutely.
When you open, first week you're open, what do you want? You want the restaurant bustling and booming.
Yes.
Because then people walking by go, oh my God, look at this restaurant.
Absolutely.
It must be busy.
Yeah.
Exact same thing on Amazon. If you launch a book and people happen to bump into the title, or it was referred to them or whatever, and they go and they look and they see 3 reader reviews.
Yes.
I don't care if they're 5-star or 1-star. 3 reviews, 4 reviews, 5 reviews. It's like the wind is whistling through the streets and tumbleweeds.
The crickets are chirping,
The crickets are chirping.
Yeah.
But they go to that listing and they see 35 reviews. They go, wow, this thing is like a phenomenon. I better buy this and read this. That's what I wanted. Yeah. So that was my plan. That was the reason I made this customer group happen. What I didn't count on was that this group turned into like a community. Some of our readers started getting their friends to join it, their parents, their kids, their siblings. My brother joined our launch team, we called it. And a bunch of people started a Facebook reader discussion group.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it became like a whole little community that evolved around the recipe. You know, that kind of buzz, that you can't buy that for $50,000. Yeah. That's really what you want for any business, is you want a hardcore of devoted, passionate fans, customers, users, patrons who love your product and who will go tell the world about it. You don't have to pay them. They'll just do it because they love it. That was the biggest lesson I've learned so far. That group has been just a revelation.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's awesome. Yes, I could not agree more. You know, we have a saying at Business Betterment, in the Academy for Business Betterment, I'd rather have 100 raving fans than 10,000 people who feel meh about me or my business.
And they gave you money, right? But
yes. You know, I mean, this is really the power of community. And you talk about that also in the book, about serve your people. Yeah. Serve your people, which is also, of course, a theme, you know, from some of the other books. And so community is a huge part of what we're doing, and keeping, you know, whether you're in business, whether you're an author, whether you run a restaurant, whether you do leadership, you know, that's what really it's about. And fantastic. I'd love to be part of that community. You know, I love the book. I absolutely love the book. You know, I could rave about it, but I want to hear.
So far, nobody has come back to me and said, meh.
No, definitely not. I can't see anybody saying meh about the book. I hear things like instant classic, and I'm like, absolutely. It's memorable. It's extremely memorable. You know, I've been eating my lunch differently.
Yeah,
Mine's just
yeah.
different, the way you go about, where, I could, and we'll talk a little bit more after about, like, even, I believe this is a book for business, every teen. I'm thinking of my nieces and my nephew, and
I'll say, I'll tell your viewers right now, because, Serena just said this thing about how she's eating differently, and what's that about? So in the very first chapter of the book, the
we
very
should probably
first,
talk about it.
yeah, I'll talk about it. Why not? The very first lesson the boy learns is nothing about how to cook. It's about how to eat. And not to spoil it for you, but this is in the sample chapter that's on my website. So
Okay,
good. But anyway, so the very first lesson that the chef gives him is, it sets him down in front of a hot dog and a Coke. And the boy goes like, oh yeah, like that's the big culinary lesson. Hot dog and a Coke. Like, what's that about? And they both sit down, they eat the hot dog and the Coke. And the chef basically says, look, I could give you a $300 meal and give myself a hot dog and a Coke. And which one of us do you think would have the better meal? And the answer is the chef would, because he really knows how to taste. He knows how to eat. He knows how to get himself out of the way and experience the food. And as a business person, for me, one of the lessons of that, and it might seem obvious, but it's one of those obvious things that is easy to forget.
100%.
That what makes a great cook, first and foremost, is love of this food. Love of the food. People ask me all the time about writing, tips on writing. How do you write? People who don't necessarily want to become authors, but they want to, write better blog posts or better newsletters or just better emails. So give me some tips on writing. And for me, the number one secret to great writing is great reading. If you want to be a great writer, and I don't mean necessarily an award-winning author, if you want to just be a great writer, like someone who, when other people read your email, they go, I love hearing from you, right?
Yes.
So if you want to be a great writer, do great reading. And I don't care what genre it is. It doesn't matter to me if it's parables and nonfiction or adventure or romance or fantasy, or I don't care. It doesn't matter what the field is. What matters is that it's great, because there's great writing everywhere. There's mediocre writing everywhere. Love of language, love of words, love of the expression of ideas and passions through sentences. That's what first and foremost makes a great writer. If you're a realtor, do you love property? Yeah. I mean, I do. I love, I love the shape of a landscape, the way a house works. So that's where it starts. And that's, the love of great food is where the skill begins.
Yeah. Awesome. And so can you tell us, without giving too much away, can you tell us about the recipe? Tell us, what is this book? Why did you write it? Tell us what's contained within the recipe. Tell us a little bit.
So it's a meld of Chef Charles and me. Okay. And we have, like Bob Burg and me, we really have a lot of the same values. It was really easy for us to make a book together. Charles wanted to convey the same thing he conveys in all of his talks, which are about the ingredients of greatness. What is it that makes a great life, a life of meaning, a life of purpose? And that's a lot of the same that I like to teach about. You mentioned earlier serving others with value. We wanted to convey sort of the recipe for a great life through this story. To me, all great learning, all great teaching happens through stories. All learning, period, happens through stories. And all stories convey their lessons through feeling, through emotions. That's why, parables aren't easy to write, because they have to be real. They have to make you feel like you care about the person.
Yes.
So our goal was to write a real story that you cared about. Yeah. Our goal was to make you cry. If you cry, we succeeded.
Often.
So the idea of the story, again, I said, it's this boy who's struggling because he's lost his father. He's touched by tragedy. And this old chef to whom there is more than meets the eye. There's a backstory that is gradually revealed in the course of the story. And there's a connection there that you don't see at first. And I won't say more than that. I've already said too much. But I guess, let me convey sort of a central idea of the book. There is on the cover of the book, let's see, I'll get a cover of the book here.
Sure. And
Here you go.
I have so many things I want to ask.
I'll go quickly on this. So
Please.
on the cover of the book,
Beautiful. There's
a picture of the blueberry pancakes with a peach rose. That's my wife's recipe, by the way.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
That's where I got that. So that's, people ask, is there a recipe this book is about? There's a recipe for life. And you find at the end that the chef's rules for cooking all become kind of a recipe for living. But also that recipe, the blueberry pancake, is a special recipe in the book. And it comes down to a scene where the boy remembers cooking this with his dad when his father was alive. The boy was young. And one Saturday morning, they're cooking these pancakes for his mom. And they're going to take them up to her at breakfast in bed. And the boy is asking his dad, what makes your pancakes taste so amazingly good? Is it like the oat flour? Is it the blueberries? Is it the maple syrup? And his father's saying, no. And his father finally says, the secret ingredient isn't anything in the pancakes. The secret ingredient is who you're making them for.
Very nice.
And that for me is kind of the core message of the book.
Yeah.
It's like, you can have a really profitable business that makes a lot of money, which I think is great. That's the goal of the business. But who is it for? What's the purpose? Who are you serving?
Yes.
What impact are you having?
Mm-hmm.
For me, I'm in business as a writer. So for me, every book is two things. It's a book, by which I mean it's a creative expression, a vehicle to reach people.
Yeah.
And that matters to me. At the same time, it's a business. Every book is a business.
Absolutely.
It has to make money, or my family and I don't get to eat blueberry pancakes. So I'm always looking at a book through two eyeglasses, as expression, as my passion, but also it has to make money as a business. Yeah. I've published 24 books. This is my 24th book. Wow. 24 books.
Yeah.
Every one of those has been a success for me as a book. Every one of them has touched people, has made a difference in people's lives. As a business, most of them have been failures.
Okay.
A small number have been successful. The Go-Giver books are successes. My Navy SEAL books are successes. The Recipe, From Your Lips to God's Ears, we hope, success. But as a business, it has to make a bottom line. But it's pointless unless I write it with an eye for who is it for? What's the point of it? What's the purpose? Mm-hmm. So I think that's maybe that's the question that the chef is really asking the boy, and that the boy really has to ask himself, because he's lost his father and he kind of has lost his purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's no crying in interviews. Okay, I'm gonna,
That's right.
I'm like, composure. No crying in interviews when I think of the story. It's a beautiful story. And I hope you don't mind, because it's making me think, if we go off topic just a smidge, because we have a lot of creatives listening.
Yeah.
Artists, painters, authors, jewelry makers. And I'm glad that you touched on this, because some of them have been failures. You're creative, you're an artist, and and I'm going to say our audience here are all heart-centered entrepreneurs or creators, creative entrepreneurs. So it's people who do things with a passion. The money's important, but it's understanding both sides. And sometimes we can get lost in one or the other, right? Is there any lesson or anything, and I know it's a huge question, and we can come back to that I know it's sort of putting on the spot here, but is there something that you can share about being a creative entrepreneur specifically that you feel would be some wisdom that they could take away?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question, because, many, many years ago, there was this wonderful book titled Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow.
Yes.
And I think we all have that idea, right? But of course, we also all know that the practical truth is sometimes you do what you love and money doesn't follow. It's not really true. It's not necessarily true. I mean, it can be true.
Yeah.
I think you should do what you love, but the challenge is,
Okay.
it's, you got to do what you love in a channel and through a form that the world wants,
Mm-hmm.
and the money will follow. So you may love making pipe cleaner statues of armadillos, and maybe there's a market for that, especially in Texas, but I don't know. Best to your question, I think that as a creative, it's a tough one, because I started out in life as a classical composer. My father is a choral conductor. I grew up in a house of classical music. My first career was as a concert cellist.
Wow. Yeah.
That's my first love, and it's still my deepest love. I just passionately love music. When I'm writing, there's always music going on in my head, and usually there's music going on in my ears. I started out as a composer, and it wasn't working. It wasn't working as a career.
Okay.
There were going to be no blueberry pancakes in my future.
Right.
And so I was asking myself the question that you're asking, very early on. I think what I've come to is this, that life is sort of a dance between myself and the universe, or the world at large, and that I need to be true to myself and follow my own voice, my own inner voice, my own passion.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I am getting clues, hints from the world around me, and they may come from people that I trust. They may come from people I don't trust, people I don't even like. They may come from circumstance. They may come from opportunities that I don't expect, but that are good. They may come from failures, and I'll give you a few specific examples in just a sec. But the point is, I'm getting clues from the universe. My belief is that the universe knows us better than we know ourselves. The universe knows us inside and out. Every cell, every bit of DNA knows us, and is dropping clues in our path. That if we could just pick up, like Hansel and Gretel and the breadcrumbs, that we can find a path that will connect our passion and the marketplace, our passion and the world at large. But it isn't necessarily obvious, and it isn't necessarily what we at first think that it is. I know it hasn't been for me. I'll give you two examples.
Sure, yeah.
One example is this. I like to say Bob Burg ruined my career. In 2004, my plan was to be a Hollywood screenwriter. I had been studying for years, screenwriting. I had a great teacher in Hollywood. We're still close. He's a tremendous guy, best screenwriting teacher in Hollywood, in my opinion, Hal Crosman. And I studied with Hal, and honing my skills. My office was stacked with screenplays that I'd poured through, and learning and parsing every word, every page. I've been out to Hollywood, and that was my plan. And Bob, who I'd edited a few of his things in one of his books, and he said, listen, I have this book that I want to do, but I can't do it myself. Will you do it with me? Will you co-write it with me? I was like, man, this is like a distraction. I don't have time for this. This is like, get away, and like, but I told my wife, then my fiance, I said, it's Bob, so I guess I should. I didn't know it, but I was getting a clue from my environment. Yeah. So I put Bob off for a few months, and then one Christmas, my wife and I were down in Florida. We went over and visited him at his home, and we sat down for an afternoon and kind of talked about it and played around with some ideas. And I came back home to Massachusetts, and a few weeks later, I had a little bit of free time, and I sat down and I started messing with what Bob had drafted, and I started playing with it, and I wrote the scene that is the scene with Deborah Davenport. It happens in The Go-Giver. It's in the chapter about the law of authenticity. Yes. And I wrote Deborah Davenport's speech. And I was like, oh my God, I love this. I love this. This is going to work. And that was The Go-Giver, of course.
Wow.
And that was the book that launched my career as an author. Here I am 24 books later. I am so grateful I did not become a Hollywood screenwriter.
Right.
I thought that was a great idea. It was a terrible idea. I thought I had the right plan. You know the expression, you want to make God laugh, make a plan?
Yeah.
God was splitting his sides at me. I had so many plans. So, here's another example. I already gave this example, which was the recipe. The plan was take it to New York. They're gonna love it. They're gonna fall over each other. They're gonna publish it. I won't have to do another thing. Here it is a year later. Turns out, I'll tell you what. That reader group, those 200 people, that would never have happened if a publisher had taken the book. This book wouldn't be as good as it is because I've had comments and critiques from dozens of readers who have actually caused me to rewrite the book. Even as late as 3 weeks ago, I was revising this based on comments I got from our readers group. This is going to be a much better book, much more excited readers because all those publishers rejected it. I can't tell you right now that the book's a runaway success because it isn't out yet. We hope it will be. But I can tell you this, that we never would have been on this entrepreneurial path, Charles and I, if the publishers hadn't all rejected us. And regardless of how many copies we sell, I am so grateful that we're doing what we're doing, that we're on this path, because we're learning so much.
I have more questions if you have a little more time. Okay, fantastic. So can you tell us a little bit about, oh yes, this is one that I wanted to know, please. So we know you have a gift as a storyteller, right? Obviously. And of course, Chef Charles, for those of you who don't know, he's not here. He has more awards and accolades than we have time to talk about on this show. He is highly, regarded.
Decorated.
Chef, highly decorated chef, and he also gives back to his community, and of course with the leadership, with men and women who serve the country, with teams, and he teaches them. So we also know, I know just from doing a little bit of research, that some of the characters, of course, are based on real life people. So how much of this book is a biography / autobiography, right? And how much of it is a combination of...
That's a great question. Okay, so the core storyline, about the boy who lost his father, and I will give this much away, that he's broken a window. He's committed an act of vandalism, which is what sets the story in motion. That didn't happen in real life. Okay. Chef Charles never committed an act of vandalism that and his father didn't die when he was young. His father was alive until just a few years ago. So that much, the story is fictional. We'll make that clear. Having said that, there's an awful lot of the boy that is Charles, and there's an awful lot of the old chef that is Charles. We talk about a few of those points in the back of the book. And a few weeks ago, I went to his house and we shot some video. We hired a professional video crew and shot a video interview where I interviewed him about that very question. Which we hope to get that video out soon. If the footage isn't all ruined, because he lives in Houston, he's suffering through that flood, Harvey, right now. But there are a lot of little pieces of Charles's life that we used in the story. The chef has all kinds of accolades, Olympic gold medals, and all these accomplishments. They're all Charles's. The letters from presidents, the pictures with celebrities, all that, all the things on the wall in his study. I sat in his study taking pictures of all the stuff on his walls. Wow. So a lot of that is just Charles's story, and he won his first gold medal at the Olympics at the age of 24 in 1988. Wow. And he's been on the Olympic team 8 times now, every 4 years. And he's won a slew of medals since then, not only Olympic, but many other competitions around the world. Here's the thing I want to say about Charles, too. Well, actually, to answer your question, there are specific characters in the book that are loosely based on real characters in Chef Charles' life. This is true in the Go-Giver books, too. I mean, you always, when you're writing fictional stories, there's always the great temptation to bring in colorful people you've known and have them populate your story. So that's fun. That's been really fun. But I think more than that, we both experienced loss. Mm-hmm. Neither one of us lost our dads at the age of 14, mm-hmm. But I lost a child, my first son, I lost when I was just a kid myself, when I was in my 20s. And Charles lost his dad some years ago. His mom lived long enough to read this book in its first draft, and which Charles says to this day, it's one of the things he's most grateful for, is that she was still alive long enough to. He has memories of the draft sitting open on her coffee table with her glasses sitting on there by her bed. So we both experienced loss, and I think everyone has experienced loss in some way or other. There's something about fiction. There's something about fiction that's meaningful, that's real. And even though the events may not be real, the feelings in them are real. And they touch everybody. And I think there's something universal about that's really important. Otherwise, stories don't work if that weren't there. I think I got far afield from your question, but the thing I'll say about Chef Charles, I want to say one more thing about Chef Charles because he's not here. One of the things about Bob Burg that I've learned over a decade of working with him is that everyone I talk to who knows him says, "Oh my God, Bob Burg, what a great guy."
Yeah.
He's one of the most universally loved individuals. Is this right or what, right?
100%.
Everyone knows Bob Burg.
Yeah.
Bob is the same in person as he is in public. He's the same guy behind closed doors as he is on stage. I've learned that this is also true about Charles. As I've gotten to know some of the culinary luminaries, celebrity chefs and people all over the country, they all say the same thing. "Oh my God, I've been following Chef Charles for years. And what a great guy. What a generous, what a selfless guy." There's a passage in the book where the chef talks about going out. I made this up. It's in the book where the chef talks to the boy about, he says years ago, there was a big flood in the Midwest.
I wanted to ask you about that. Okay.
People lost their homes and they lost everything. And I took a team. We went out there to cook for the people who were helping them with the rescue efforts and everything. I made that story up, right? Which is eerie because right now that's going on in Houston. Yeah. And yesterday I talked to Charles and he said, "Yeah, we're cooking for a team of first responders at the country club right now. They're cooking meals for first responders who are involved in helping get these survivors, out of their waterlocked homes in Houston." So it's like life imitates art. It's almost too weird to be imagined. But yeah, Charles and his family and his crew are all safe in Houston, and they're busy with rescue efforts like everybody else in Houston, just digging out. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this stuff is real. It really happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And we send our love and our prayers to everybody down there. And, of course, he's out there now helping out just as he had in the book. So that I wanted to ask you specifically about that, like, has it happened before or, anyways, it is a little eerie. But I'd imagine. And I think that the way we live, and I don't want to give away things from the book that I should not yet, but you speak about this principle in the book. May I tell me if I'm allowed to, So
go for it.
One of the things that you touch on is the way you do one thing is the way you do everything, which is also something we talk about in Business Betterment, and how, which is essentially, what you're telling me about Bob and what you're telling me about Chef Charles, and I'm sure yourself, and the way we live our lives and businesses, it's about so much more than the money and the service and it's so can you touch on anything from the book that you think would benefit an entrepreneurial community, because it is about life, it is about business, and it is about cooking. So how do you think entrepreneurs could take these lessons and apply them in a way that
there's so many ways, and it's such a broad application. Just as one example, there's a scene in the book where the server Ruth describes this to the boy, where there's this breakfast cook they call Mad Dog. By the way, there was a real person that they called Mad Dog that this is loosely based on. And so now whenever Charles and I are writing, I sign my letters to him Mad Dog. That's So there's a wild breakfast cook called Mad Dog, and the way he was hired was they needed a breakfast cook, and the chef had interviewed a bunch of people, and what happened was he came in for the interview, and he walked from the front door to the back of the diner just to go through the swing door into the kitchen to go have the interview, and on the way from the front door to the back, he passed a table that had been cleared, but there was a dirty coffee cup on the table, and he stopped and took the coffee cup and cleaned it up and made the table perfect. And the chef was looking through the pass-through and saw him do it. And by the time he got to the interview, he was hired. I borrowed that idea from a story that the president of Southwest Airlines told once, when I was interviewing her, and she talked about how they were interviewing people for some corporate positions in Southwest, and by the time they flew the person in, right, to Dallas from wherever they lived, and of course they flew him in on Southwest flights, and by the time the candidate got to headquarters, they'd already decided they weren't hiring him, because they'd already heard from flight attendants on the airplanes how the guy treated the flight attendants, and they decided, this is not a guy we want to hire. I just took that story and reversed it.
100%. But
we decided, this is a guy we want to hire.
Absolutely.
But here's the lesson of it. Mad Dog had no idea anybody was watching. He was just walking through an empty restaurant. And in a sense, this principle, this old Buddhist expression, how you do anything is how you do everything, which the chef describes as pay attention to the little things. When you do, the big things will tend to take care of themselves. Another way of saying that is greatness is often found in the things you do when no one's looking. And that's I think, something that's valuable for entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
How you do the little things, yes. Whether it's how you fold the napkin, how you greet the passenger, who you don't even know, he's important or she's not important or whatever, you don't know. How you do anything in your business, how you answer an email, how you answer the phone, how you refund. I was talking with Brandon Webb, my Navy SEAL sniper friend, who is now an entrepreneur, and he has this massive media business. And a couple of years ago, they started a crate club, with one of these things where every month they send out a box of stuff. You subscribe to it. And when they first started it exploded. It grew so fast that it way outpaced their capacity to fulfill well. And so they had all kinds of customer service problems. This is a common symptom of growth, right? Sudden growth, and their their service was a mess. Things were late, they were packed wrong, and it was like they were going crazy. It wasn't that they weren't trying, they were just growing too fast. So Brandon started getting on the phone and handling a lot of these complaints himself. And he said people were getting the phone and they're like, wait, let me get this right. You're the CEO and you're talking to me? He's like, God, of course I'm talking to you. What could be more important than this?
Yes.
That's, to me, exactly what that principle is.
Love it. Yeah.
If it's not important enough for the CEO, then, who is it important for,
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing and saying that. I completely agree. Completely. Absolutely. There are so many other points too. I mean, again, without giving away too much of the book, and you can tell me, Serena, take that out. But, mise en place, the principle of mise en place that he's teaching, that reminds me of the importance of building a process and a system on a small scale, so you can build your business on a large scale, so that when it comes to, if you know the principles, if you know your process, then you can take it and you can scale. Whether you're serving one or you're serving 300,
it's just like the E-Myth, right?
Pardon me?
Just like the E-Myth, Michael Gerber, right? The system in your business. This principle, mise en place, in cooking. And what Serena's talking about is this idea of organizing your space, which for a chef is critical. And there's a scene in the book that'll show you exactly how critical it is. By the way, I did have chef cook an omelet blindfolded in our video.
Really? Oh, no way. Okay. Wow.
You did pretty well too. You didn't expect that. But that, to me, that's so critical. That mise en place, it's your system. It's your tools. It's how you have your business set up so that it's set up for success.
Absolutely.
I've found that if I don't have my bed made and my kitchen clean, I'm not going to write a good chapter that day. And don't get me wrong, it isn't that I'm a neatnik, because if you looked around my office right now, there's stuff that I wish were neater, but I'll tell you what I have. I have a desk where I revise. I have a different seat where I come up with first drafts.
Really?
I learned that's how I work. Yeah. I have a chair where I sit with paper and a pen. I have handwriting that's so terrible I can't even read it half the time. Yeah. But I know how my brain works. I know how my process works, and I figured out what I need, how to set myself up for success.
Yeah.
So I don't try to draft in the seat I'm sitting at right now. This is where I revise. And every business has that. You want to set your restaurant up. You want to set your real estate business up. You want to set your financial consulting business up. You want to set your pottery studio, your painting studio, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Set it up for success with the tools you need, the space you need, the quiet you need, the noise you need, whatever you need.
Yes.
Set that up for success, because that's your mise en place. Yeah, I think that's so important.
Yeah, very, very important, mise en place. And having a process and a system that they take their clients through as well is so crucial. Right. And that to me is also mise en place, saying this is the process.
It could be a phone script.
100%. Yes.
Could be a phone script.
100%. You answer an email, a phone script, it's your system. It's,
right.
And I think that we sometimes overlook the importance of not having to reinvent the wheel every time you call. And it gives our clients confidence as well in the work that we've done, because we know how to take them from A to Z. Does that make sense? So
yes.
I thought there were so many things in the book that were absolutely 100% relevant to business and to the entrepreneur, whether you're a painter, an artist, a potter, a chef, who's gone to Culinary Institute, or if you're, in the service industry, if you are a financial advisor or a coach, we have a lot of coaches as well. So
yeah, because if you're in a service industry, if you're dealing with clients and your business consists of talking with them, right? Then your knives, your tongs, your oil, your salt and pepper are your phrases, your solutions, again, it could be phone scripts, and it could be not even literally phone scripts, but certain answers to common dilemmas.
Yes.
Solutions to common problems.
Yeah.
One of the things, I don't know if you know the book, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. But,
I have confession time. I've heard it a million times. I have never actually read that book.
It's
I know it's a classic.
He describes as what we're saying here. Okay. And one of the examples he uses is, how many times have you walked into a store and the person behind the counter said, what did they say? They say, "Can I help you?"
Yeah.
And what do you say back? "No, just looking."
Yeah. Okay.
And he says, just that, if you just took that phrase and you said something helpful, like, "Is this your first time here?"
Yeah.
And if they say, "Yeah," then you get to say XYZ. Did you know that we have blah, blah? And if they say, "No, I've been here before," then you get to say, "Oh, what did you find what did you buy before? Or did you find?" In other words, plan out the transaction so that you aren't just shooting from the hip. Yes. Because most of the time people in service are really shooting from the hip.
Yes, yes.
And it's not a very good place to shoot from, because you're going to miss.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to reinvent, and it takes so much more time and energy. And when you feel confident in the process, you have much more control over the situation, and you're able to help people get to where they need. And it really comes down to that. You're able to serve better. Yes. You really are able to serve better. And so one of the things we talk about is exactly this, don't shoot from the hip. And one of the beautiful things, I know we're going a little bit off topic, but I think our audience will appreciate it, is that so few people, which I'm assuming, so most stores you go in, "Can I help you?" While I was putting myself through school, very young, long time ago, more than 20 years ago, I, worked in retail, worked in clothing stores, first job, 14 years old, hired. The minute I turned 15, I was on the floor in McDonald's, all about systems, Didn't last there very long. I'm too great. But
who does? Who does?
Yeah, exactly. But one of the things is, so few people do it. So few people take the time to say, how can I do this different? How can I do this better? How can I serve in a different way that's going to connect with my client, that you really stand out, right? You really have the chance to get the answer that you're looking for and to leave your mark. And so, and I think that's one of the things, tying it around, is one of the things that you do so well, John, is that you take these lessons that are universal, and because you've told them in such a beautiful way, with such with these characters, that they stand out and they stay with you. And I say the same thing to Bob Burg when we spoke, that they stay with you, and we fall in love with the characters. you know?
Oh,
And so I can't thank you enough for writing this book and for allowing me a preview and sharing this
oh,
with our audience.
you are so welcome. Thank you. Bless you. I got to tell you, I, I have to fall in love with the characters. And it's funny because when I start writing a book, I'm not in love with them when I write the first few words down, right? But within a few pages, it's like I'm kind of finding out who they are. Like the chef says, I'm peeling them, right?
Yes.
Getting to their inner essence. And there's a point, and I'm saying this because right now I'm working on a new parable, and I just hit this point this morning actually,
Okay.
where I started to realize who this is I'm writing about, and it's like, oh, I'm falling in love with this person. You know, it sounds like a weird thing to say, but you kind of do that with customers.
Yes.
You kind of, you know, in a little way, you fall in love with them. You fall in love with a little bit of who they are, what they're looking for, what their experience is. You know, it's connecting is what it is. Yes. It's a connecting. So I appreciate your saying that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that's why we love reading those books. And so I am really excited. So can you tell us a little bit more about where we could find the recipe? So I know it launches October 17th.
October 17th. It's, of course, it's available now for pre-order.
Okay.
And it's on Amazon.
Okay.
And everywhere. Although probably not at Barnes & Noble. When it launches, you'll be able to go into Barnes & Noble and order it. They'll be able to get it. It's in distribution, but it probably won't be sitting on the shelves. Okay. But it's at all the websites. And certainly you can pre-order at Amazon now. It's going to be in hardcover, ebook, and will be out in audiobook also. Okay. I do all the reading. And we also have a pre-order bonus offer, which is includes the videos of me interviewing Chef Charles and so forth, and cooking the recipes and everything. And you can find that at theingredientsofgreatness.com.
Theingredientsofgreatness.com. And we're going to have the links there for everybody to buy. Okay. I highly, highly recommend the book if you're in business. You know what? One for you, one for a friend. There are recipes in the book. I learned about life. I learned about love. I learned about cooking. I learned about business. You actually learn how to, I'm like, my cooking is going to be taken to the next level. So,
and hopefully you not only cry, but also get, laugh a little bit too.
100%. Absolutely. Absolutely. It was all good stuff. And so I can't thank you enough. Again, we're going to be doing some giveaways for the book. Please reach out, let John know how much you enjoyed it. Grab yourself a copy. And again, thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with before we let you go?
I would just like to say that we've had some of our early readers come back and say, after reading the book, I felt intimidated to go into my kitchen. And I want to let you know, don't be intimidated, because the greatest things I've learned from Charles, being with him, are also the simplest things. I mean, you watch him cook, and it's like, it's not the razzle dazzle with the chef knife, which is, razor sharp chef knife. He's like in there cooking with his hands, moving things around with his fingers and tasting them. It's the simplest things are the most meaningful things in the kitchen. So don't be intimidated. All you have to do is love food. Yes. Get in there with your fingers, taste everything, and just appreciate it. And the lessons will unfold for themselves.
Thank you. Beautifully said. Thank you so much, John. We wish you best success on the launch. We know it's going to be awesome. For sure. There's no question. And we wish you...
Your lips to God's ears.
Absolutely. We'll be sending you all the positive vibes. And for everybody, share the love of the recipe. And for yourself, for your business. And if I know I keep talking, but if you have a teen, I think it's a fabulous one for yourself, one for your teen, because I think that it's a great place to start at that age also to learn from the recipe. So thank you so much for your time. Can't thank you enough. Wishing you all the best, and keep us posted.
Thank you. I love this show. Thank you so much. You do such a good job. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Take care.
You too.